Jeff, you ready to talk some hockey? We've got our man Sam Carchidi, hockey guru, legendary sports writer, now going to tell us about his next project too. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Jason? Jeff, good to be here.
So glad to have you back. We'll get to your project shortly. Let's start with the state of the Flyers. I went to a game at the end of the season, the Rangers game. Never seen so many blue shirts in a building before. Never seen so few fans in a building before. Talk to us about the state of the Flyers with all of the turnover that we're seeing. It seems like a time of transition.
Yeah, you did not see the best game of the season. The Rangers, of course, took over the Wells Fargo Center that night, but I think the Flyers actually made some decent strides this year. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it; they're far from being a Stanley Cup contender, but a lot of the young kids showed progress, and Owen Tippett was the leader of that group, and I can name five or six other guys that were 25 or under that had good years. And but you just don't know if they're going to continue on that pace. Another encouraging thing was Travis Konechny looking like a future star. He should have been an all-star this year. But this team, still needs a proven scorer, a Johnny Gaudreau type, if you will, and still needs a top defenseman. I think you're going to see a lot of moves in the offseason. I think Danny Briere will be very aggressive, much more aggressive than Chuck Fletcher. Chuck, for whatever reason, sat on his hands and was very passive. And I think Danny knows he needs to change the chemistry, especially on defense. I think this defense has gotten stale. So I think you're going to see a Provorov or a Sanheim traded. I think they would like to move Ristolainen if they could, but who, by the way, played very well the second half of the year. But to me, I think either Sanheim or Provorov will get dealt. And if they can find somebody for Tony DeAngelo, he might go too. But you're going to see one or maybe two of those guys dealt in the offseason. They need more firepower up front. And, the fact that Cutter Gauthier has agreed to go back to Boston College for a year, that hurts them a little bit. But I think in the long run, it'll help them. But, they're really relying on the fact that they think Cam Atkinson and Sean Couturier will both be 100% next year. That does not make them a Stanley Cup contender. It makes them maybe a playoff contender, not a great one, but at least in the mix. But the good news is that, as I mentioned earlier, that the young kids are developing, and it's a step in the right direction. It's not time for a parade, but it is a step in the right direction, I think.
You mentioned the change in the front office. Obviously, anything, at least the Flyers fans, is better than having Chuck Fletcher come back. So a change is good. The question is that we've been debating, is this change the right change? Is Daniel Briere, who has, for the most part, spent his post-player career working in a minor league organization, ready for this step?
I think he is. I mean, you never know for sure, Jeff, but I will say this. Danny was one of the most intelligent players I've ever dealt with. When he played, he could analyze a game and the key moment in a game seconds after the game was over. And he could, tell you who was at a position and who did what. He's a student of the game. Does that translate in the front office? I think it will. I think he really is a student. He knows other teams. He knows personnel better than Fletcher, I would say. And I think he's going to be aggressive. He knows he has to be aggressive. That's what the fans want. And, I think is it rolling the dice to a certain extent? As you said, it's his first full-time job, but you got to get your start somewhere. And I'm a big Danny Briere fan. I think he's got a great hockey mind. And, is he going to make mistakes? Yes, but I think he'll make shrewd, aggressive mistakes, and he'll know when to take chances and when not. Fletcher, for whatever reason, did not do that. I mean, the classic example, of course, is Johnny Gaudreau last year, where it wasn't a surprise that he became an unrestricted free agent. You knew for years that was going to happen. And yet Fletcher didn't think ahead, didn't clear the space. And Johnny Gaudreau, as everybody knows, wanted to play here. When's the last time a star player wanted to play in Philadelphia? It's been a long time. So I don't think you'll see those type of mistakes from Danny Briere. And, Chuck Fletcher's been a GM for more than a decade, and he made mistakes. So, the fact that Briere is in his first year, I don't really hold that against him. I think, I think he's going to be a good GM, and hopefully the fans will give him a chance if, in fact, he is hired. I mean, I'm surprised it's taken this long. I expected him to be named by now, and I wouldn't be surprised if later this week they name him the full-time GM. But the longer it goes, the more questions are out there.
Do you think that he's got the resources? One, the resources from the ownership group to go out and do whatever needs to be done, or do they want him to just draft it and build that way? And second, if they are giving him the resources and the go ahead to do whatever he wants, do they have enough in the cupboard with regard to the players they have now to make trades to get anything substantial back?
Yeah, that's the big question. They would love to trade Kevin Hayes. Are there going to be takers, or do the Flyers have to eat half his salary for the remainder of his contract? That's part of the job of the GM, though, is to make those things happen. And Fletcher did not do that. But that's a very good point. I mean, is anybody going to want a Kevin Hayes? But maybe you get creative. Maybe you throw in a third or fourth round pick, for somebody to take his contract. You certainly don't do what the Flyers did with Shane Gostisbehere. They gave up way too much for them to take his contract, which really wasn't that bad. I mean, Hayes' contract is pretty bad, $7.1 million a year. Ghost was considerably less than that. So, and then they went out and Fletcher compounded that by not only getting a player who was just like Ghost in D'Angelo, just a right-handed version, but then, giving away a second, third, and fourth round pick. I mean, it made no sense. And, but that'll be the key, does he have the players that other teams want, and will he be able to entice other teams to take them if he throws in maybe a prospect or two and get something in return? But we'll see. I that'll be on Danny Briere, and I have faith in him, though. I think he will get it done.
Yeah, it's not second guessing, because people questioned that move at the time, lots of them. Talk to us about the direction of the organization. New governor with Dan Hilferty replacing Dave Scott. Do we know anything sort of about him? What do we know about what Comcast or their role will be in terms of supporting the team? Jeff sort of asked about, will they have the resources? How involved are they going to be with this new leadership?
Yeah, I'm not sure Hilferty is going to be very, he'll have final say, but I think he's going to trust the people below him. And, he was a Independence Blue Cross executive. That's his background. He has a soccer background a little bit, but, he's more of a hockey fan than anything else. He admits that he doesn't know the ins and outs, and he's learning, kind of like Dave Scott. And, I think he'll put good people. I think that's why I think it's important that they hire the correct hockey operations guy, which they're still searching for. A Ray Shiro type guy, to me, would be ideal. And that'll be a critical hire. Someone that, Danny Briere will report to. And I think that'll be the person that keeps things moving. And as far as the resources, I mean, in a cap world, it's everybody's got the same amount of resources. I mean, there's X amount of dollars and X amount of dollars to spend. So you have to spend them wisely. You can't make mistakes. And Fletcher, I hate to keep going back to him, but, he made mistakes in what he paid D'Angelo, what he paid Ristolainen, Kevin Hayes' contract. I mean, you can go on. And, and his predecessor, Ron Hextall, made some mistakes as well. So, they've been trying to dig out of cap problems now for a long time. And so I think Danny will be kind of cautious a little bit as far as going into the free agent market. He may get a mid-sized player this year, a mid-level player. But I think the next year, year two, is when you'll see him try to make a big splash. More contracts off the books. and you'll have Cutter Gauthier here. That'll save you some money. He'll be the regular center, probably the number 2 center 2 years from now. So that'll save you some money. And but they have to get some of these guys off the books. There's no question about it, because that's weighing them down right now.
All right. Well, we've talked Flyers. The show goes on, even though the Flyers are not in the playoffs. What have you seen so far in the early action of the NHL playoffs? And what is based on what you're seeing, who would you expect to be in the NHL finals this year?
Yeah, I think it's been great theater so far. And I'm really liking what I see. To me, the surprising team right now is Seattle. I really like what I see from Dave Haxtell's team. They play with speed, and they a lot of young guys on the team, and they don't play like Haxtell's Flyers played. That's for sure. And not that they're going to get to the finals. I don't expect them to. I know the Rangers lost last night, but I've liked what I've seen from the Rangers. Boston has been, Boston. They've had a little bit of a hiccup, but I wouldn't be surprised if Boston was upset by the Rangers. They were my dark horse before this all started. In the West, I think so many teams could come out. I've always liked Dallas. I think Dallas is a quiet underdog. I think they just play a steady game, and Minnesota's tough competition. But I went with Dallas before the playoffs started to come out of the West, so I'll still go with them. And I think it'll be Dallas and either Boston or the Rangers. I mean, everybody's picking Boston, so I'd like to go different. And I'll roll the dice with the Rangers, and I'll go with a Rangers-Dallas final, and may the best team win. But Boston will be tough to beat. There's no question. They don't have many weaknesses. But as we've seen, the President's Trophy winner does not come out and win the Stanley Cup too often. The odds are not with them. Everybody's shooting for them. So it'll be interesting. But I think the playoffs have been great. There have been a lot of overtime games, a lot of great competition, some outstanding goalie play. And, Edmonton and LA have had a terrific series. I think LA has been better than people thought. And I wouldn't be surprised if that series goes 7. And, but it's been great hockey. It's just another level. It just aggravates you when you see it, because you want to see the Flyers in there, and you forget how exciting the playoffs are, because every shift is magnified, as you guys know. Every shift is important, and we just haven't had that in 3 years now. And next year will be going on 4 years. And I miss that. I miss that, the games and the periods and the shifts, when they mean so much. And Flyer fans have been cheated out of that for 3 years now. But it's been great hockey, though, no question about it.
Is your at least your prediction based mainly on goalies? I mean, again, you have with the Rangers, you have Shesterkin, and with Dallas, you have Oettinger, and those two goalies have played great most of the season, and certainly into the playoffs so far. Is this still a goalie league?
Oh, I think it is. I think there's no question about it. And, we've seen it over the years with Tampa Bay. And I don't know if you hear the dogs barking in the background. Hopefully you don't. But
who are they predicting?
But there's something to that. I mean, there's no question that, going back in the day when the Flyers were winning Stanley Cups, you take Bernie Prine out of the equation. I know we're going back almost 50 years now. I mean, nothing much has changed there. The goalies win championships, and Bernie was the Conn Smythe winner in both those years. I do think the goalies play a big part, and they will play a big part moving forward. I mean, we saw it with the Islanders last night. They stayed alive because of their goaltender. And goalies and defense, and that's one good thing the Flyers have in their favor right now. They have a goalie. I think Carter Hart. Some people say, "Oh, look at his numbers; they're not that great." Well, look at the team in front of him. So I really think that the goaltenders will be a big factor in this series, the biggest factor. And I think moving forward, the Flyers have that, in the bank, if you will, with I expect Urson to be the backup next year. And, I think Carter Hart can be a Stanley Cup winning goalie down the road if you get the right pieces in front of him. And right now they just don't have that. That's another reason why I think the defense on the Flyers really has to change. The dynamics just don't work right now. And Provorov, again, not to beat a dead horse, but Provorov has not been the guy that they thought he was going to be. I know somehow he won the Barry Ashby Award as Flyers' best defenseman this year, but
it's a low bar.
Did not have a great year. I mean, did not really even have a good year. Had an okay year to me, and you can't have that from your number one defenseman.
The goalie is what makes me hope the Flyers aren't as far away as it seems watching those games. And I'm actually encouraged with how Carter Hart has held up through what he's gone through for such a young player to be able to maintain his focus. So I did want to move to your new project, though. So you were a teenager who put together $40 to go to Game 6 of the 74 Stanley Cup Finals. Your life has now come full circle. You're partnering with director Jeff Hare, who was a 10-year-old Flyers fan from Roxborough in 74, to collaborate on a 10-part series on the Broad Street Bullies. Tell us about your new project.
Yeah, we're so excited about it. We've been interviewing players from the Broad Street Bully era, not only players, but people connected to the team. Lou Scheinfeld was a vice president back then, and we've interviewed even Gene Hart, the late Gene Hart's wife, and his daughter, of course, and Ed Snyder's family members, and just people connected to the team. Lou Nolan, of course, is the only person that's still around that works for the Flyers that was there when they won their cups in 74, 75. And what we're doing, Jason, Jeff, is we're putting together at least a 10-part series. We think it'll probably evolve into a 20-part, 2-year series on the life and times of the Broad Street Bullies. And we always say it's probably going to be about 30% hockey, and it's going to be more behind the scenes. You're going to learn about Bobby Clark and him off the ice. You're going to learn about Ed Snyder off the ice, and we're digging into the personal lives of these people. We've talked to a lot of the wives of the players, and we're excited. We want the average person, not the average hockey fan, but the average person to turn on this show and really enjoy it, and to get caught up in the personalities and what makes them tick, and what they went through, and the groupies that followed them. And there was a lot of that going on. And
I assume Rexy's Bar will make an appearance in the series.
Who's that?
Rexy's Bar will make an appearance in the series.
Rexy's Bar will. In fact, we talked to Patty, whose dad was the owner. He has passed away, and we talked to Patty, who was the general manager there, and probably talked to her for about 2 hours, and she told us story after story after story. So we're really digging. We're trying to get the background. We want to get the story as accurate as possible, because some of the people unfortunately have passed away that were connected with that team. So we're gathering all kinds of stories. We must have 1,000 pages of interviews that we're going through right now. And, our goal is to have it out in the fall of 2024, which would be 50 years since they won their cup, their first cup. And, we've talked to people about Kate Smith and just their daily routines, and a lot of interesting stuff happened. And that team was so close off the ice, and the wives played a big part in it. As I said, we've interviewed several of the wives, and the wives kind of held that team together. And very interesting. We've learned a lot of things that have not ever been discussed or written. So it's not a documentary. I want to make clear. Everybody knows what happened. If you're a Flyer fan, you know what happened in 74 and 75 when they won their 2 cups, and when they beat the Russians in 76. You know the details. We're going behind the scenes and show you the personalities behind the players and their families, and as I said, what they went through. We're going to start in 1967, the struggle to bring the franchise here, and it's going to go up all the way through to 1976. 76 is when they lost to Montreal in the Stanley Cup Finals, but they were minus Rick McLeish, minus Bernie Parent. They were both injured. 3 of the 4 games were 1-goal games against the mighty Montreal Canadiens. And at the end of that series, they lost in game 4 at the Spectrum. The fans didn't want to leave. They gave them a standing ovation. They were there for at least a half hour, just standing and cheering. It was like a thank you for the 3-year run. And so people say, why you're ending it on a negative note when they lost? But it wasn't negative. It was like a salute to the 3 years. And we also wanted to bring it into 76 because of the magnitude of the Russian game. And, the NHL despised the Flyers because of their style back then. And yet when they played the Russians, Clarence Campbell went in the locker room before the game and gave them a pep talk and said, be yourself and blah, blah, blah. And the players didn't want to hear it from him because, here's a guy who despised the Flyers. If you see pictures of him handing over the cup with this to them in 74 and 5, and he's got a sour look on his face, did not want to hand the cup to them, did not want them as champions representing the league, and the old guard was really against the Flyers. It's not a stretch to say they were the most hated Stanley Cup champions of all time. The league despised them. Teams around the league despised them. And they use that as fuel. And we're going to talk about going into enemy rinks and which rinks were the roughest, and the New York Ranger fans throwing stuff at their buses every time they were there and challenging them to fights, and a lot of stuff like that, behind the scenes stuff that nobody's ever seen. So we're real excited to tell this story and to tell it in the players' words and in the wives' words and people connected to the team. And as I said, we're hopeful it'll be out in about a year and a half, and we've rolled up our sleeves and we're really excited to do this. It's a labor of love for both Jeff and myself. And Jeff has worked on a lot of other movies for Lifetime. He's done major motion pictures, but he said he's more excited for this movie than any project he's ever been, because he even tells the players, we've been in interviews together, and he says, I was a 10-year-old kid and you made my life when you won the cup. So, he's coming from that perspective. And as you mentioned, I paid $40 from a scalper and bought a ticket to game 6 of the 74 final, which of course was the clincher, the 1-0 win. And it was the best $40 I ever spent. And so we're kind of reliving those days, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
Well, we can't wait to see it come out. We hope that in that year and a half, the Flyers are playing better hockey at that point, and look forward to having you back as the Flyers start to play better and as the series comes out. Sam, thanks for always giving us a little bit of time, and best of luck with the project.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.